What if I told you that the recent David Schwartz comments, the ones that half the XRP community is celebrating as confirmation and the other half is mourning as a death blow to the thesis, have been almost universally misread, and that the actual content of what he said is far more strategically interesting than either side has bothered to acknowledge? Strong claim, I know. But before you scroll past this video, ask yourself this brutal question. When the chief technology officer of the company most tightly associated with an asset speaks in carefully worded, legally measured language, why does retail immediately reach for the simplest possible interpretation? Why is the default reading either he confirmed it or he killed it, when the actual structure of what he said does neither? While the crowd is fighting on Twitter over a single sentence, something far more important is being telegraphed behind the curtain. Today, I'm going to walk you through what Schwartz actually said, why he said it the way he said it, and why his framing is not a rejection of the long-term thesis, but a refinement of it. And the world, once again, is missing the signal. Welcome back. On this channel, we don't trade hype, we decode structure. Today, we are going under the hood of one of the most misinterpreted communication events of the recent cycle. David Schwartz's response to extreme XRP price targets, the legal framework that shapes every public statement Ripple executives are allowed to make, and what his actual reasoning reveals about how institutional capital really enters this asset. No moonboy fantasies, no emotional charts. Just the language, the legal context, and the institutional positioning that retail has been trained to ignore. Before we go under the surface, this is informational analysis, not financial advice. Let's jump in. Let's start with the hard truth. 99% of viewers reacted to David Schwartz's comments emotionally instead of analytically. They saw a senior executive at Ripple appear to push back on a specific price target, and they collapsed the entire content of what he said into a binary. Either he is confirming the target by mentioning it, or he is dismissing the target by qualifying it. Both readings are wrong, because both readings ignore the single most important fact about the speaker. Schwartz is not a YouTube influencer. He's not a Twitter account. He's the chief technology officer of a publicly visible company that has spent hundreds of millions of dollars defending itself in one of the most consequential legal battles in crypto history. Every single word he says in public is filtered through a legal apparatus that no retail commentator on earth has to navigate. To understand his comments, you have to understand the apparatus. Here is what almost nobody on this platform is willing to say clearly. The argument Schwartz advanced, that if rational, wealthy investors genuinely believed there was meaningful probability of extreme valuations, the current market price would already reflect that expectation, is a textbook, efficient market argument. On the surface, it sounds like a dismissal, but it contains a hidden assumption that quietly does all the work. It assumes that all serious capital enters this asset through visible, public market price discovery. And that assumption, if you actually understand how institutional finance operates, is the weakest part of the entire framing. Once you see the assumption, the entire interpretation flips. Because institutional capital does not enter an asset by bidding it up on Coinbase. It enters through over-the-counter desks, structured private allocations, custodial agreements, and derivative-based exposure. By design, that activity does not move the public chart in the way retail expects. The visible price is not a complete signal. It is a partial signal, and anyone working at the technical core of a settlement-grade asset understands this perfectly. Brad Garlinghouse has alluded to it in different language. The recent on-chain data confirms it. This is not coincidence. This is convergence. And once you see the convergence, you cannot unsee it. Let's do the math. The kind retail desperately wants to ignore. Their argument that, if it were probable the price would reflect it, relies on the premise that all probability-weighted information is currently reaching the public order books. But on-chain reality tells a different story. Approximately 800 million XRP are now locked in ETF custodial structures. Documented digital asset treasury vehicles, including Evernorth, hold hundreds of millions of XRP in non-trading reserve allocations. Ripple's Japanese institutional partner, SBI, has issued instruments redeemable in XRP, contractually obligated demand that does not appear in any visible price discovery mechanism. The XRP rich list, the public on-chain ranking, shows wallets in the shark tier, those holding between 100,000 and 1 million XRP, growing in number through every recent down cycle. Long-term holding wallets sit at all-time highs. Now ask yourself, if rational, wealthy actors truly did not believe in extreme upside, why is the on-chain footprint of accumulation accelerating in the exact period in which retail conviction has been weakest? Why are the wallets with the deepest track records adding to their positions while social media is loudest with capitulation? The visible price is not telling you the whole story. The on-chain ledger is telling you a different story. And the gap between those two stories is the entire setup. Let me quantify the supply side, because that is where the math becomes truly uncomfortable. XRP has a hard cap of 100 billion tokens. Roughly 40 billion remain in escrow under transparent on-chain release rules. 5 to 7 billion are estimated permanently lost. Strategic reserves, partner allocations, market maker inventory, ETF custody, treasury vehicles, and long-term institutional holders absorb tens of billions more. The actual freely tradable float that retail and institutions are competing for is far, far smaller than the headline circulating supply number suggests. And every token that moves from a retail exchange into a multi-signature institutional vault is a permanent reduction of that float. Once it enters custody, it does not come back to market for a 10% profit. It is gone. Now layer the demand side. The global cross-border payments market processes roughly $150 trillion every single year. The foreign exchange market alone moves $7.5 trillion every single day. The Bank for International Settlements documents that approximately $27 trillion sits idle in Nostro and Vostro accounts just to make the legacy system function. If even a fraction of that liquidity migrates to on-chain settlement rails, which the documented research from major central banks suggests is no longer a question of if but when, the demand against the constrained float is structurally enormous. This isn't a prediction, it is a requirement. This isn't speculation, it is a design requirement. If you have a problem with these numbers, you don't have a problem with me. You have a problem with the laws of supply, demand, and on-chain transparency. Now let's address the legal context that almost no retail viewer is properly weighting. Ripple is a company that has spent years in active litigation with the Securities and Exchange Commission. It has faced class actions. It operates in an environment in which a single casual statement from a senior executive can be entered into legal record and weaponized. In that environment, communication is not a casual exchange of opinions. It is a constant, careful exercise in liability management. When Schwartz uses phrases like, "What you see is what you get," he is not making a moonboy claim or a doomboy claim. He is doing something far more specific. He is building plausible deniability, not in a conspiratorial sense, but in a strict legal and strategic sense. He is allowing himself to communicate without creating exposure. This is exactly how senior executives at every regulated financial entity on earth communicate about their own assets. They never confirm extreme valuations. They never reject extreme valuations. They use language that sets defensible expectations while preserving optionality. The retail interpretation that takes the words at flat face value misses the entire purpose of the language being used. Brad Garlinghouse has used the same posture for years. Monica Long, Ripple's president, has been similarly careful in her statements about 2026 and full-scale institutional adoption. Careful enough to communicate the direction without making promises that could be litigated against. This is not retail communication. This is regulated entity communication. Treating it as if it were retail communication produces exactly the misreading we are watching unfold. Ask yourself this brutal question. If Schwartz had simply said, "No, XRP will not reach extreme valuations," would he have used that specific phrasing about rational actors and current price reflection? Or would he have said something simpler and more definitive? The construction of his statement is itself evidence that the statement is not a flat dismissal. It is a theoretical framework offered as one model of price formation. And the model relies on assumptions that institutional reality does not satisfy. He is communicating exactly as much as the legal apparatus around him allows him to communicate. No more, no less. Look at the broader chessboard. While retail is debating the meaning of a single sentence, Ripple has spent the last several years deploying over $3 billion in strategic acquisitions. Metaco for bank-grade custody, Standard Custody for New York regulated trust services, Hidden Road as a prime brokerage clearing trillions annually, Rail for stablecoin-powered payments, G Treasury for Fortune 500 corporate treasury management, Palisade for advanced wallet and custody technology. This is not a company hedging against the failure of its own asset. This is a company building the institutional bridge required for whale-tier capital to commit at scale. Larry Fink at BlackRock has gone from publicly dismissing crypto to championing tokenization as the future of every financial asset. Franklin Templeton, Fidelity, JP Morgan, every apex institution is moving in the same direction. The Bank of Japan, the Japanese FSA, the European Central Bank, the IMF, every serious monetary authority is publishing on tokenization. This is not retail FOMO. This is calculated positioning. The retail crowd is staring at a single sentence. The institutions are staring at infrastructure. One of them is going to be very, very right. The other is going to be writing comments on YouTube about how they were lied to. So when does the visible market reconcile with the invisible accumulation? Pay attention here, because the catalysts are no longer theoretical. They are scheduled. The Digital Asset Clarity Act and the broader market structure legislation moving through the United States Congress represent the final regulatory green light. Once a clear classification framework is locked in, the risk premium that has held back trillions of dollars in compliance-bound capital evaporates overnight. That is not a slow drip. That is a gap event. And at that point, the language that Schwartz and other senior executives are required to use today will become very different from the language they are allowed to use tomorrow. In Asia, Japan's Financial Services Agency has already moved decisively to recognize XRP as a regulated digital asset. The Bank of Japan continues to publish CBDC research that explicitly discusses interoperability. The European Union's MiCA regulation is now fully operational. Each one of these developments removes another wall between institutional capital and on-chain settlement. Then there is the macro layer. The Federal Reserve is pivoting toward an environment of expanded liquidity. Global debt levels are forcing every major central bank to reconsider settlement architecture. The IMF has openly discussed the need for a more efficient cross-border framework. When the wait-and-see money becomes the all-in money, and that transition is no longer a matter of years, but of quarters, the visible price will not move smoothly. It will gap. The fuse is already lit. Now let's talk about the side of the equation most people refuse to confront. The market is in transition from a phase driven by belief and narrative into a phase driven by structure and evidence. In the early phase of crypto, narratives drove capital. In the institutional phase, capital drives narratives, and capital moves slowly, methodically, and silently until the structural conditions are right. Schwartz's comments, properly understood, are a signal that this transition is happening. He's not killing the long-term thesis. He's killing the fantasy of an immediate switch flip. There is a meaningful difference. The fantasy of immediacy is what creates the painful boom-bust cycles that destroy retail conviction. The structural reality of gradual integration is what produces the durable, sustained appreciation that institutions actually deploy capital toward. We are moving from an era of abundance to an era of scarcity, and retail has not priced this in yet. Exchange reserves of XRP have been trending lower for years. Crypto quant data, Glassnode analytics, on-chain forensic researchers, every credible source confirms the same trend. Tokens are leaving exchanges and entering custody. Order books are thinning, buy walls are hollowing. When the regulatory switch is flipped and the institutional gates open, the price discovery process will not be gradual. It will be violent. New buyers will not be buying whole XRP. They will be buying drops. 1 XRP equals 1 million drops, and very soon, drops will be the only unit late retail can afford to accumulate. There is a phrase you will start hearing more often in the next 12 months. The great priced out. It refers to the moment when retail realizes the entry price they wanted no longer exists, and the entry price they can afford produces a position so small it cannot meaningfully participate in the new system. The window is closing, not in years, in quarters. I know exactly what you're feeling right now. You're watching red candles. You're reading interpretations of Schwartz's comments designed to make you doubt yourself. You're seeing influences pivot to whatever shiny narrative is trending this week. And the temptation to give up, to read one sentence as a death blow and walk away, has never been louder. I understand that. But my job is to help you distinguish between noise and signal. The literal surface reading of carefully lawyered statements is noise. The legal and structural context behind those statements is signal. None of the underlying institutional building stopped because of one interview. It accelerated. Being early feels exactly like being wrong, right up until the moment reality catches up. That is the cruelest psychological trap in this entire industry, and the institutions know it. They are counting on it. They need a steady stream of exit liquidity from the confused to fund the entry of the informed. The question is not whether the price will recover. The question is, who will still be holding the position when the regulated communication that constrains today's executive language is replaced by the regulated communication of a fully integrated digital asset? If you've made it this far in the video, you're not the confused, you are the informed. Hold that line. Let me leave you with this. Words are a distraction. Structure is the reality. One is a sentence. The other is the assembled, on-chain, institutionally documented foundation underneath everything Schwartz is allowed to say in public. The question is, are you reading the words or are you reading the room? History does not reward comfort. It rewards those who pay attention when the room is quiet. And right now, the room is very, very quiet. Exactly the way the legal apparatus around senior Ripple executives requires it to be. If you made it to the end of this analysis, drop the word structure in the comments. I want to see who actually understood what was decoded today. If you value this kind of deep structural breakdown, subscribe and turn on notifications because the catalysts are accelerating. The math doesn't lie, and the system is almost complete. Stay patient, stay rational, and as we always do, we don't wait for the future, we plan for it. This content is for informational and educational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research before making any investment decision.